art and creation speaking the language of God. Art is the body's pronunciation of the soul. Paint becomes an articulation of the painter's spirit, uttering his confessions in vowels and consonants of tea rose, sapphire, or deep chestnut, formed into words that are faces and landscapes and abstractions. This is art. The poet feels the pain or wonder of life pressing down on her chest, and the breath that is forced out of her lungs is exhaled in iambic pentameter, haiku, or sonnet. Aimless floating words are ordered with ink and imagination into epic, fable, free verse, or limerick. This is art. The industrialist sees his brother's need for warmth, shelter, tools, and so with his factories, fueled by sweat and ingenuity, he bends steel and mountain. In the furnace of his creativity, he melts raw potential, pouring it into the cast iron mold of intention, and it cools and hardens into his brother's met need. This, too, is art. I will be writing of these things as a person who nearly flunked art class. In junior high, I discovered that I had a unique and precise combination of shoddy craftsmanship, questionable aesthetic taste, and unimpressive visual intelligence that would never make me a great painter. This wouldn't have bothered me had I not been infatuated with the art teacher's daughter. But my chances with her dwindled as my brush shook in craggy lines across the page. I could sense the maternal presence lurking behind me, those judging, incredulous eyes fixed upon my work, which resembled the efforts of a much younger person, or perhaps a promising young chimpanzee. In the meantime, my little brother Rob watched Bob Ross on public television and learned how to paint a landscape with some baby lambs roaming a field. My parents framed it. They still have it in their house. Honestly, I thought they made a bigger deal of it than necessary. It was a freaking Bob Ross knockoff. But that was all it took for the Gungor family to know who the most promising artist was in the family. And evidently it was not me. I was more the bizarre, lanky, pseudo-Afro type, whose artistic energy was poured into directing violent sci-fi home movies and trying to learn how to shred on an acoustic guitar. I tried hard on a few of my art class paintings, but everyone seemed to think that I was only trying to be funny. So my defense mechanisms kicked in, and I decided that if I was going to draw or paint something, the pictures would be absolutely absurd. Sasquatches eating people, aliens with 6 giant breasts, and so on. The art teacher was not fond of my work. Outside of the art teacher and her now unattainable daughter, I didn't know many people in my town who were passionate about art. Surprisingly few of the great art collectors in the world choose central Wisconsin as their home. We've lacked the so-called culture of modern art museums, poetry readings, or Shakespearean theater. But we did have the world's largest ground barn, as well as an endless exhibition of farm smells, dive bars, and hundreds of thousands of pounds of white, dimply fat. I did know one other artist, though, my uncle from St. Louis. Man, I thought he was the coolest. His right hand had the 2 middle fingers mostly missing, so it looked like he was always making the rock and roll sign. He had a bit of a mullet and played a white bass guitar. So if that wasn't cool enough, he had a fridge full of beer in a pool table room that also featured a slightly abstract picture of a naked lady. He painted that picture, and I always hoped that the naked lady wasn't my aunt. That was just gross. In my young central Wisconsinian mind, my uncle belonged to the world's small elite group of creative people who lived in big cities or college dorm rooms and spent their times doing impractical things like painting naked people or sculpting bowls. The artist was a romantic idealist who might weep at the sight of a fallen birch tree, but he wasn't someone you'd want to trust with your house keys. These kinds of people were interesting enough, but we didn't have much need for them in central Wisconsin. For many people, words like art and creativity feel lofty and out of reach. But in truth, the foundation of the artist's work is no different than any other human work. It's simply an intentional ordering of reality. Every sentence you've ever articulated has been a creative work on some level. As a child, you learned how to use your tongue, lips, and vocal cords to create sounds that have been culturally agreed upon to act as symbols of objects and feelings. Speaking is the process of creating and communicating a series of thoughts by combining these sounds into patterns, like a painter combines individual colors into a painting, or a musician strings together individual notes into a composition. Creativity is simply the human brain forming new connections between ideas. And we're all engaged in this process every day. The common idea that there are some people who are creative and some who are not is a myth. On some level, we're all artists, we're all creators. Of course, not all of us consider our work art. Much human creativity gets ignored for the genius that it is because it's so plain and practical. Take sewer systems, for example. We don't think of sewer systems as requiring artistic impulses. Nobody's painting sewer pipes different colors or experimenting with different finishes. Sewers are not intended as expressions of human creativity. They're intended to move our crap away somewhere less intrusive. But sewers surely are the result of creative genius. Somebody imagined them, designed them, poured the cement for them. Did the designer of the sewer pipe not flex the same creative muscle as the painter or the poet? Does that sort of design not come from the same sort of brain activity, the same divine spark of humanness that is responsible for all design? Of course it does. And this idea that we're all creators, this idea that